Okay, so you're probably putting the theme together here that my main goal during this whole process of us being on lockdown is helping you get things done faster, feeling productive by the end of your day, also that you can have that time to tend to your body during this stressful period of your life and enjoy this time at home with your family while the kids are at home. So today I want to talk about batching. I'm going to give you 13 ideas about what you can batch in your daily schedule, and this is both for work and your personal life, and then also how to apply the batch into your block schedule. Let's do it. Hi, Melissa Dillon here to interrupt the show real quick to let you know that the second edition of our COVID-19 Ultimate Family Plan has now been released. Go to raisingkindness.org to download your copy of the second edition, which is packed with a step by step guide to helping you find clarity and calm in your routine going into the second week of the lockdown period. Also, a huge list of resources to help you through gaining that clarity and calm that you're seeking, and also homeschooling your children, managing work, all that stuff. So please go to raisingkindness.org and download your copy of the second edition today. Now, let's dive into the show. We're replacing the More Time Loving Mom Life show right now with support to get you through this, feeling like you're continuing to thrive in a life that you love with your kids. Let's do this. Okay, so I've talked about batching before, and I wanted to go into more depth, especially because things are adjusted in your schedule when you're on lockdown at home with your family. So, first, I'm going to give you 13 things that you can actually batch, and then I'm going to give you the step by step process of actually applying it and putting it into action. Are you ready? Okay, so first, before I get into what you can batch, what is batching anyway? So, batching is the idea of taking all similar tasks and putting them into one block of time. So that way you're not jumping back and forth. Science proves that it's hard for your brain to do that, to jump back and forth between, say, something that has to do with creativity or writing, and then jumping right into an appointment or meeting or social media or something with learning or addressing emails. Jumping back and forth, it takes about 15 minutes for your brain to ease itself into getting into the groove with certain types of tasks. And then jumping right into a different kind of task, it just kind of bogs you down. It sucks energy out of your life. And you may, if you're finding that you're feeling tired at the end of the day, you're drained, you're lower in energy, this is a little trick that you can do. Applying batching in your life will help boost your energy and make you feel like, there's a better flow to my day. And you'll find at the end of the day that you actually got more done with batching versus the multitasking or the jumping back and forth that may ensue. Hello, kiddo. My little boy just walked in. It just leaves you feeling that you have a nice flow and you have a better sense of accomplishment because you were able to think straight from task to task. So, now let me give you 13 ideas about what you can apply the batching method to. Number one is email or other communication, such as texts or phone calls. So, those are some of your biggest distractions, right? Getting those notifications and those pings and those dings and the rings and all that, and then stopping what you were doing, answering the phone call, responding to the text, and then getting back to work. Does that sound familiar? So instead of having that problem, turn off your notifications. Go into your settings in your phone, go into your settings in your computer, and stop the notifications so that first, it is on your terms when you respond to those emails. It is on your terms when you get back to your phone calls and your texts. Turn off your ringer when you're involved in other tasks. This way, you can batch all of that communication into one sitting. Maybe you get it all done within an hour and you can spend that time all at once versus having those many interrupted breaks. Number two is housework. So you can batch your housework. Maybe there are a couple different ways you can do this. And I'm actually going to make a note for myself to include a resource that's really good with this. She's a genius. I'm going to find it. It really helped me when I was on maternity leave. Um, okay, so share that resource. Can't believe I didn't think about that when I was doing my notes. So with housework, what you can do is you could do this in two different ways. You can either batch where you're doing all the dusting, all the stuff that's off the floor, do all of that through the whole house first, and then do all your vacuuming in the whole house next. And you can even break this up where maybe on one day you're doing all the dusting and all the reorganizing and putting things back in its place one day, and then the next day you're doing all the floors and sweeping, mopping, and vacuuming, and include your family in this so that you guys can all batch this time together and have housework as a family affair. So that's definitely a recommendation. Number three is your creative time. You're writing and creating for customers or your personal stuff that's on the computer that's going to be using your right or your creative side of the brain. So I'm going to go into numbers three, four, and five, kind of go all hand in hand because you're in the creative process. I'm actually going to include a link to an article called "Is It True That Creativity Resides in the Right Hemisphere of the Brain?" It's published in Scientific American by a an educator and consultant who spent a lot of his time on models of brain activity, and he put it in a really interesting way. I'm a huge brain nerd. There's also an episode of The Hidden Brain put out by NPR, and that's a podcast episode. I'll also include that link. And they also talk about this, which part of the brain is involved in the creative process, the left or the right or both. Well, in my personal experience, and this guy Herman is backing me up on Scientific American, that it's actually both. And you don't want to have your left brain involved in creativity and your right brain's work. You don't want your right brain involved in your logic and planning, the functionality of your creative process. So you want to batch everything that's going to be part of your creative process. And then going into number four would be, say, something like editing. So if you're doing any editing or analysis of your project, once you get into something like analysis and something where you need rationale, you're applying a process where thinking is involved, that's all that stuff that you batch. And that would also include your planning time. So number five is giving yourself planning. So let me go through real quick because I know I've had a lot of little talking points for each of these. So far I've included number one is email or other communication. Number two is housework. Number three is your writing or your creativity time. Number four is editing, that writing or creative process, part of the creative process. Number five is your planning time. So setting aside time in your block schedule. And I mention the block schedule almost every episode because it's included a step-by-step process that's totally free for you to download at raisingkindness.org. Go download that so that you really have a clear, concise idea about how you and your family are going to run a successful household while still getting some good productive work time and enjoying each other's company. Go to raisingkindness.org and download that guide because it's going to help you guys create the block schedule together as a family. And you need time to do that. So coming together either for yourself and or as a family, having that planning time ahead is really going to prepare you to execute quickly throughout the rest of your week. So for us, we come together about once a week to figure out how the routine is, what worked, what didn't, and we still kind of find ourselves, we're getting into a pretty good flow, but we still find ourselves going, we needed to do something a little bit different with that situation. Because everything's situational, right? Things come up and change the schedule. Well, did you ebb and flow pretty nicely as a family, or did you see some hiccups? Did the kids get emotional? Those are conversations that you're going to have either during this planning time, or you end up finding yourself feeling bogged down with thinking about it a little too much throughout the week, or feeling yourself bogged down or stressed because you're not giving yourself that time to plan. So number five is that planning time. Number six is learning and personal development. So things like this podcast or getting caught up on reading, things like that. And of course, this is one of those things that's kind of tricky because if you're throwing a podcast in your headphones and you're going on a run, sure, that's considered kind of a multitasking thing, but at least you have it's dedicated time to listening to the podcast versus trying to plug it in at random times when you should be working on other things, or listening to podcasts and skimming articles while you should be working. When you take pause and try to find other ways to fill your time or take breaks like that in between when you should be working, it may make you feel it's a distraction. You may be using it as a procrastination method and some of the things you just don't want to do for work. By being disciplined and setting aside time for that learning and personal development, you'll feel confident that you know you'll get to it. And then also taking away that excuse of procrastination for the frogs that you should be getting done and knocking out. Number 7 is social media time. So this is another one, another big distraction that can creep in as just a total procrastination central throughout your work day. And also a distraction during your family time, where if you find yourself picking up your phone for no other reason except to skim and see if somebody responded to your posts or to check messages and notifications, I recommend shutting those notifications off and going ahead and blocking time in your schedule to do it if you're finding that this is one of those things that's becoming a little bit of a problem in your schedule. So I talked about that in my episode of the 10 most embarrassing things that I did in the first 2 weeks is spending social media time on times that I shouldn't have been, and setting aside that time to go, okay, where am I going to put this time, or do I need to cut this out of my schedule altogether because this isn't right. So if you find yourself feeling the same, then take this advice and consider batching that time, setting aside a certain period in your schedule that you'll be spending time on social media. Number 8 is appointments or meetings. So instead of having a couple appointments or meetings that are breaking up your day every single day, consider having one day where you have as many of your conference calls at once. That way, if you have a partner in the house, your spouse or a nanny or a babysitter, and they're there for a 4-hour period, knock it all out on a Tuesday, knock it all out on a Thursday. Pick one day and just knock everything out where you're going to have the support and you can have those undistracted times. I recommend, if you do have a lot of meetings right now, going back and listening to the episode that was published just before this, all about having productive meetings. And I'll put that in the show notes also. Number 9. So, number 9, this is so important, batching in your me time. So, even though, of course, you're going to be taking those little mini breaks to give your brain a little boost of energy throughout your day, consider setting aside a block of an hour or 2 hours, even where your spouse or the babysitter is supporting you, they're taking the kids, and you have time to truly decompress. I feel like, especially for us moms, that me time ends up flying by the wayside because we didn't schedule it. So if you're one of those moms that's feeling like where you're just feeling kind of low energy and you're feeling like you haven't had that time to even think for yourself and have your own thoughts, then this number 9, the me time, will be for you. So consider looking at your schedule, seeing where you have some open blocks of time, or see where there's some things where maybe now that you've spent a couple weeks on lockdown and you've got a system, maybe there are some things that you implemented a couple weeks ago that just don't make sense anymore, or maybe you thought they'd make sense and they don't anymore. Free yourself up, get rid of that thing, and plug in some me time, or spend that time in the evenings, or get up earlier in the morning to have that me time. It's so, so important, especially during this time of what many are considering a crisis. And I don't want to use that word. I'm trying to be more positive here because this is so, so temporary and all of this is going to pass. But we still, nonetheless, it is still a heightened stress situation. And that's when me time, rest time, decompression time is critically important for your health. Number 10 is that together time. So your child needs that one-on-one time with you. And it's recommended in Positive Parenting by Amy McCready. She recommends starting with at least 2 sessions of 10 minutes of dedicated, what she calls mind, body, and soul time. This is that one-on-one time with your child. What if you spent even more time? What if you spent a couple hours just hanging out? You can do your workouts together and your outdoor time together, go on a nature walk. Imagine how beautiful that would be. Now, I know that a lot of you are still working full time and you may not necessarily have this luxury, but the weekends are available for that still, where you could still go ahead and give your spouse that time off. They can have their decompression time or spend their one-on-one time with another sibling while you get that one-on-one time with one of your children. So there are many different ways you can do your together time, and batching it is a great way to really be mindful of making sure that it happens. Number 11 is cooking. So I'm not going to say that I do this. I can go ahead and give you some ideas or there are some other people. I was kind of doing some research and trying to see if there was anything that I missed. And this was one of them because it's not something that I do. I'm not a batch cooker, but maybe you may find this is really helpful for you. I've also had some friends that have found that it's really helpful, that they spend Sundays really prepping, cooking all that chicken for the week and cutting it up and throwing it in the Tupperwares, maybe chopping up the vegetables, doing all of it for the entire week so it's ready to go. And then that way, when you go to cook, it's not a big process. You've already got everything chopped up, ready to go, and you could go ahead and finish up the rest of the recipe and throw it in the oven, throw it in the pan, that kind of thing. So that's something I can recommend for you based on what others have shared with me. Number 12 is your honey-do list. So the things that maybe your spouse or you have for repairs or household projects. So this could be things like instead of doing little things around here and there and taking little breaks and doing 10-minute things here and there, maybe you guys do a family affair of knocking out projects and working together. Maybe your kiddos have their own ideas of honeydew things that they can even do and accomplish and contribute to the house. Batch that time for a honeydew list time where all those things are done for your home at once. And you may be really surprised because maybe your kids have some really great ideas. Maybe your spouse has some really great ideas that they can contribute to a way to do it more efficiently or faster, or an idea that you may find is even better. And if you're doing it together, it gets done a whole lot faster. So that's a great way to do it. Schedule it ahead of time so that way you guys are all on the same page. And finally, number 13 is stats and bill tracking. So I'm a numbers nerd, and maybe you are too. But if you find yourself continuously looking at your bills because you're feeling kind of stressed, or you're continuously looking at stats to see if numbers have gone up or numbers have gone down, whatever it is, why don't you set aside some time each week, and instead of doing it every day or multiple times a day, discipline yourself by scheduling it to have a batched time where you're reviewing your bills. And another episode that I had put out is all about when you're in crisis, or when you're in a stressful situation and bills are something that needs to be addressed, like what's going on with this lockdown period and with the coronavirus and the business shutdowns, then batching the time to just one time a week, address any follow-ups you need to do with your bills. Then I'm going to post the episode about the step-by-step process of calling around and getting those bills knocked out and setting up your relief programs with everybody, and then the process that I use to follow up. So I'll put that in the show notes too, but doing it once a week instead of having everything scattered out throughout the week so it's always on your brain, by having that scheduled as just one thing once a week, batched all at once, it'll really relieve a lot of stress. Okay, so now that I've given you 13 different things that you can do, I'm going to run through them again one more time real quick, and then I'm going to share with you a way that you can actually apply the batching method to your block schedule. All right, so let me review these real quick. Number 1 is email or other communication, texts or calls. Number 2 is housework. Number 3 is writing or creative time, anything that's online at the computer. Number 4, editing. Number 5, or editing that stuff that was in number 3. Number 5 is planning time. Number 6 is learning, personal development. Number 7 is social media time. Number 8 is appointments or meetings. Number 9 is me time. Number 10 is together time. Number 11 is cooking. Number 12 is your honey-do list. And number 13 is stats and bill tracking. All right, so now what do you do? So applying the batching method to your block schedule, number 1 is to actually schedule these tasks into the appropriate blocks of time. If you don't have your calendar set up, again, go to raisingkindness.org and download the guide. Go through those steps with your family. And then that way your calendar is all set up and ready to just plug this in. So schedule the task into the appropriate block of time. Number 2 is use a timer to stay on track. So I always talk about timers. It's so important to keep you on track so that way you're not spending too much time or more time than you had planned, and then now your schedule's all messed up. So using a timer will keep you on track. Number 3 is remember to incorporate rest periods. So important to incorporate those rest periods to allow your brain to debrief what it just finished and have that white space so that when you jump into the next task, you're relaxed, you're refreshed, and you feel like, okay, I'm at a blank slate and I could just dive right in. Okay, so I hope that this helps. Thank you so much for listening. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Please do subscribe so that you get notified. I'm putting out as many episodes as I possibly can at once. I'm even batching these episodes right now. So thank you so much. I hope that this helps. Please let me know if it didn't so that I can address your questions. I look forward to talking with you